working as unto the Lord, not for human masters. There's a moment in every job when the question surfaces. Who are you really working for? Your boss who critiques every decision? The company that demands more each quarter? Or someone higher? Someone whose standards never shift with market trends or office politics? The Apostle Paul wrote to the Colossians with a command that flips the entire employment relationship upside down. Work as if Christ himself signs your paycheck, as if every task lands on his desk for review. This isn't metaphor or motivational speech. It's the anchor of Christian work theology. When Paul instructed slaves and workers to serve their masters as they would serve the Lord, he wasn't endorsing oppression. He was planting a bomb under the empire's economic system. Because suddenly, the arena of labor became a worship service. Every spreadsheet, every construction site, every classroom, every hospital shift transformed into a cathedral moment. The quality of your work ceased to be about earning approval from a supervisor and became an act of devotion to the one who sees every hidden effort. But somewhere along the centuries, this teaching got diluted into a justification for exploitation. Employers quoted it to demand longer hours. Workers twisted it into self-righteous laziness, claiming God cares only about their heart, not their output. Churches preached it as passive submission to unjust systems, rather than a radical reorientation of motive. The teaching became a tool for control instead of liberation, and the beauty of working coram Deo before the face of God got buried under cultural distortion. The shift happens when Monday morning feels as sacred as Sunday worship, when the screen glows at 6 a.m. And your first thought isn't dread of the boss's email, but awareness of God's presence in the ordinary. This doesn't make you a doormat for abuse or a machine for productivity. It makes you free. Free from the tyranny of human approval, free to work with integrity even when no one's watching. The question isn't whether your boss deserves your best, it's whether Christ does, viewing work as worship and sacred calling. Most people divide life into two categories, the sacred and the secular. Sundays are holy, Mondays are mundane. Prayer is spiritual, profit margins are not. But this split runs deeper than bad theology. It's a wound in how we see God's design for human existence. From the very beginning, before sin fractured everything, Adam was given work, not as punishment, but as partnership with the Creator. Tending the garden wasn't drudgery. It was priestly service, cultivating order from chaos, naming what God made, stewarding creation under divine authority. The doctrine of vocation teaches that God calls people not only to salvation but to specific spheres of service in the world. The Reformers fought against the medieval idea that only monks and priests had true callings. Martin Luther insisted that a milkmaid glorifies God as much as a minister if she milks the cow for God's glory. Every legitimate occupation becomes a stage where God's character is displayed. The teacher reflects his patience. The engineer mirrors his order. The nurse embodies his compassion. Your cubicle is an altar, if you make it one. Yet the modern church still preaches an unconscious hierarchy. Full-time ministry is the highest calling, and everyone else is just funding the real kingdom work. Missionaries get the applause, and accountants get the leftovers of God's attention. This thinking has driven countless believers into guilt, burnout, or secret resentment of their jobs, if only they were doing something that really mattered for eternity. But Colossians 3:17 shatters the divide. Whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus. Everything. Let that thought sit in the comments for a moment. When you clock in tomorrow, you're not leaving the faith behind. You're entering a mission field where the gospel is demonstrated through craftsmanship, integrity, and perseverance. Your work isn't an interruption to your spiritual life. It is your spiritual life embodied. The question isn't whether God cares about your career, it's whether you've invited Him into it. and whether you're willing to let that reshape how you answer the phone, write the report, or handle the disagreement. Because if work is worship, then mediocrity is a broken song. Excellence and diligence in performing duties. There's a subtle blasphemy in sloppy work, a quiet heresy in half-hearted effort. When a Christian shows up late, cuts corners, or delivers subpar results, they don't just damage their reputation. They misrepresent the God they claim to serve. Excellence isn't about perfectionism or workaholism. It's about integrity between what you profess on Sunday and what you produce on Tuesday. The book of Proverbs returns again and again to the theme of diligence. The diligent hand will rule, but laziness leads to poverty. Not just financial poverty, but poverty of character, trust, and witness. Diligence means doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. It's the farmer who rises before dawn, the student who reviews notes one more time, the builder who measures twice, the nurse who double-checks the dosage. It's not flashy, it's faithful. In a culture obsessed with hacks, shortcuts, and instant results, diligence feels almost countercultural. But the Bible consistently honors the steady, unglamorous grind of those who show up and do the work. Joseph in Potiphar's house, Daniel in Babylon's bureaucracy, Nehemiah rebuilding walls. But diligence gets distorted when it becomes workaholism, when your identity is fused to your productivity and rest feels like rebellion. Some Christians wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, confusing burnout with faithfulness. They quote, "Whatever you do, work heartily," while ignoring, "Remember the Sabbath." Excellence doesn't mean endless hours or chronic stress. It means working wisely within limits, prioritizing what matters, and trusting God with outcomes you can't control. When diligence becomes an idol, you're not honoring God, you're replacing Him. The test of true diligence isn't what you do when the spotlight's on. It's what you do in the fourth hour of a tedious task no one will ever applaud. It's refactoring code that only you will see, proofreading the footnote in the report, cleaning the equipment after the shift ends. These moments reveal whether your work ethic is rooted in performance or worship, because God sees the hidden faithfulness, and He rewards not based on visibility, but on stewardship. Integrity and honesty in all business dealings. Integrity is the alignment between who you are and who you claim to be. It's the refusal to split your identity into competing versions. The church self, the work self, the private self. When those fracture, you're not just inconsistent, you're counterfeit. In the marketplace, integrity shows up in 1,000 small decisions. The expense report that could be fudged, the email that could obscure the truth, the contract clause that could exploit a loophole, the client invoice that could be inflated. Every single one is a chance to reflect God's character or distort it. Honesty costs. That's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to preach in a prosperity gospel culture. The ethical supplier charges more. The transparent proposal might lose the bid. The refusal to lie for your boss might cost you the promotion. Integrity isn't rewarded in every workplace. Sometimes it's punished. But the call remains. Speak truth, even when it's costly. Honor contracts, even when no one checks. Admit mistakes, even when you could hide them. Return what isn't yours, even when you could rationalize keeping it. This is where faith gets tested in the furnace of real-world pressure. The collapse of integrity rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It erodes in inches, a small lie here, a compromised value there, a silent complicity in something you know is wrong. Before long, you've built a career on a foundation of sand, and the cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable. You pray before meals but cheat on reports. You sing worship songs but slander coworkers. You tithe generously but steal company time. The compartmentalization fractures your soul. Integrity isn't just about external reputation, it's about internal coherence. The most powerful witness in a corrupt workplace isn't the coworker who preaches loudly, it's the one who simply refuses to lie, who absorbs the loss rather than pass it to someone else, who tells the truth even when it's awkward. This kind of integrity is rare enough to be remarkable, and it opens doors for conversations that no sermon could. Because people trust those who are honest even when it hurts, and they wonder where that kind of strength comes from. Integrity isn't just a personal virtue, it's an evangelistic strategy. Avoiding laziness and working with enthusiasm. Laziness is a quiet sin. It doesn't show up on most accountability checklists, doesn't trigger scandals, doesn't make headlines, but it slowly rots the soul from the inside out. Proverbs paints a devastating portrait of the sluggard, the one who says there's a lion in the street as an excuse to stay in bed, who turns on his hinges but never rises to work, whose field grows thorns and whose life yields nothing. Laziness isn't just about physical inactivity. It's a spiritual posture of withdrawal, entitlement, and avoidance. It's the belief that the world owes you comfort without contribution. Enthusiasm is different from hype. Hype is manufactured energy for external consumption. Enthusiasm is internal fire that fuels sustained effort. The Greek word itself means in God, in theos, passion that flows from divine presence. Colossians 3:23 commands believers to work heartily, with soul-level engagement, not as people-pleasers but as those serving the Lord. This doesn't mean faking positivity or pretending every task is thrilling. It means choosing to invest yourself fully in whatever task is before you, even the mundane ones, because the presence of God sanctifies the ordinary. But here's where it gets twisted. Some Christians are lazy at work and call it faith. They show up late, produce little, and spiritualize their apathy by claiming they're too heavenly minded to care about earthly tasks. They quote, "Seek first the kingdom," as justification for neglecting responsibilities. This isn't faith, it's presumption. It damages the testimony of Christ in the workplace and confirms the worst stereotypes about religious people. On the flip side, some are enthusiastic to the point of burnout, equating exhaustion with godliness. They've replaced rest with guilt and can't distinguish between diligence and destruction. Imagine if every Christian worker was known for showing up early, staying engaged, and doing their job with contagious energy. Not because they're trying to earn heaven or impress anyone, but because they're wide awake to the presence of God in the present moment. Laziness dims that light. Enthusiasm amplifies it. The question isn't whether your job is exciting, it's whether you're willing to bring the fire of God's presence into it anyway, and let that reshape everything you touch. Respecting and obeying employers with sincerity. Submission isn't a popular word anymore. It conjures images of weakness, manipulation, or blind compliance with injustice. But Ephesians 6:5-8 and Colossians 3:22 instruct workers to obey their masters with sincerity of heart, not with eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ. This is written in a first-century context of slavery, which makes it even more radical. Paul isn't endorsing the institution. He's giving believers a framework for maintaining integrity and witness even within oppressive systems. Your boss's worthiness isn't the issue, your witness is. Sincerity means you obey whether or not you're being watched. You respect authority not because your employer is flawless, but because God has ordained structures of authority for order in society. This doesn't mean blind obedience to immoral commands. Daniel and his friends obeyed Babylonian kings until obedience would violate God's law, and then they disobeyed with respectful clarity. But short of that line, the Christian worker submits to direction, honors deadlines, follows protocols, and treats supervisors with dignity. even when those supervisors are difficult, incompetent, or unkind. This kind of counterintuitive respect is a form of spiritual warfare. The distortion comes when churches preach submission as passivity in the face of abuse, when employers exploit workers and expect silence because God honors submission. That's heresy. Biblical submission is voluntary, contextual, and always bounded by higher allegiance to God. If your boss asks you to lie, cheat, or participate in harm, your submission ends. If the workplace is unsafe, toxic, or illegal, you're not required to endure it as some twisted form of martyrdom. There's a difference between honoring authority and enabling evil. Wisdom knows where the line is. Share a time when respect opened a surprising door in the comments. The real test is when your boss is unreasonable, when the expectations are contradictory, the feedback is harsh, and the recognition is absent. Can you still respond with respect? Not because they deserve it, but because Christ does. This is where obedience to employers becomes worship of God. You're not performing for the corner office. You're performing for an audience of one. And that removes both the sting of being overlooked and the intoxication of being praised. Your stability doesn't rise and fall with your supervisor's moods, servant leadership, and treating others with humility. Jesus redefined leadership in a single act. He wrapped a towel around his waist, knelt before his disciples, and washed their feet. And then he said, "I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done." This wasn't a nice gesture for ceremonial occasions. It was the blueprint for how authority is supposed to function in the kingdom of God. The world's leaders lord it over others. They leverage power, demand deference, and build hierarchies of control. But in the upside-down kingdom, the greatest is the servant of all. And that applies directly to the workplace. Humility doesn't mean weakness. It means accurate self-assessment combined with genuine concern for others. A humble leader listens before speaking, admits mistakes without deflecting, gives credit generously, and takes responsibility quickly. They don't micromanage out of insecurity or hoard information to maintain control. They empower others, develop potential, and celebrate wins that aren't their own. This kind of leadership is shockingly rare in corporate culture, which makes it a radiant witness when it shows up. People aren't used to bosses who care more about their growth than their productivity, who treat them as image bearers, not resources. But servant leadership gets distorted when it becomes people-pleasing. When the leader avoids hard conversations, fails to hold standards, or sacrifices mission for comfort. Servant leadership doesn't mean being soft. Jesus was a servant, but he also overturned tables and confronted hypocrisy. Humble leadership makes tough calls, delivers hard feedback, and holds people accountable. But it does so with respect, clarity, and a commitment to their development, not their destruction. The worst version of this teaching is the boss who exploits servant leadership language while demanding endless labor from their team and calling it ministry. The workplace doesn't need more leaders who know how to dominate. It needs leaders who know how to kneel, who listen to the intern's idea with the same attention they give the executives, who take the blame publicly and give the praise privately, who measure success not by their own advancement, but by the flourishing of those they lead. This kind of leadership doesn't always get promoted, but it always leaves a legacy, and it always reflects the character of the one who laid down his life, being a witness through godly character and actions. You're being watched, not by surveillance software or productivity trackers, by coworkers who are studying your life for clues about whether this Christian thing is real. They notice when you don't join the gossip in the break room, when you stay calm under pressure, when you apologize instead of deflecting, when you work with integrity even when it costs you. They're not reading your Bible, they're reading you. And whether you like it or not, you're writing a gospel with your life. The question is what story it tells. The most effective witness isn't the coworker who preaches constantly. It's the one whose life raises questions. Why don't you panic when projects fail? Why do you treat the janitorial staff with the same respect as the CEO? Why do you admit mistakes so freely? Why aren't you bitter after being passed over for promotion? These moments of countercultural behavior create curiosity, and curiosity opens doors that argument never could. 1 Peter 3:15 says to always be ready to give a reason for the hope within you. But notice the setup. People have to see the hope first. They have to wonder why you're different before they ask. But witness gets weaponized when Christians use the workplace as a captive audience for aggressive evangelism. They plaster Bible verses on cubicle walls, force prayer on uncomfortable coworkers, and hijack meetings to preach. This isn't boldness, it's insensitivity. And it often does more harm than good, painting Christians as obnoxious, boundary-ignoring zealots. There's a time to speak, and there's a time to simply live in such a way that your life becomes the invitation. Being a witness doesn't mean being obnoxious. It means being consistently Christ-like in a way that makes people hungry. What would change if you embraced that tension and shared your thoughts in the comments? The workplace is a mission field disguised as a paycheck. You're not there by accident. You're placed there strategically by a God who desires that none should perish. Every conversation, every conflict, every moment of pressure is an opportunity to show what life looks like when it's surrendered to Christ. Not perfect life, redeemed life. The kind that stumbles, confesses, gets back up, and keeps trusting. That kind of authenticity is magnetic, because the world isn't looking for flawless Christians. They're looking for honest ones, praying for coworkers and their needs. Prayer is the most overlooked weapon in the Christian workplace arsenal. Most believers pray for their job, for their own success, their own stress, their own promotion. But how many pray for the coworker in the next cubicle, the boss who seems impossible, the subordinate who's struggling, the company itself? When Paul commands believers to pray without ceasing, he doesn't mean pray only for yourself. He means intercede for those around you, to stand in the gap between their pain and God's provision. And the workplace is full of people carrying burdens they'll never announce in a staff meeting. Praying for coworkers doesn't mean making them projects or treating them as evangelism targets. It means genuinely caring about their lives, their sick children, their financial stress, their broken marriages, their mental health battles. It means asking God to meet them where they are, whether or not they ever acknowledge Him. This kind of prayer shifts how you see people. The annoying coworker becomes someone trapped in their own insecurity. The harsh boss becomes someone wrestling with pressure you can't see. The gossip in the break room becomes someone desperate for connection. Prayer rewires your heart before it changes theirs, and that's often the point. But prayer gets distorted when it becomes spiritual gossip. I'm praying for Sarah because I heard she's having an affair. That's not intercession. It's sanctified slander. Real prayer for coworkers is private, specific, and ongoing. It's praying for wisdom before the difficult conversation, for patience when the deadline is unreasonable, for protection over the team during layoffs, for healing when someone shares a diagnosis, for salvation when you sense someone searching, and sometimes when the Spirit prompts, it's offering to pray with someone in real time, not as a performance, but as an act of love. The irony is that praying for coworkers often changes you more than it changes them. You can't consistently intercede for someone and continue to resent them. Can't pray for their success and sabotage them. Can't ask God to bless them and treat them with contempt. Prayer softens your heart, clarifies your motives, and aligns your actions with God's will. It transforms the workplace from a battleground into a mission field, from a place you endure into a place you serve. And sometimes, long after you've moved on, you'll discover that those prayers mattered more than you ever knew. The workplace isn't neutral ground. It's sacred space, where heaven meets the ordinary grind of emails, deadlines, and paychecks. Every principle in this list points to the same truth. Work done for the glory of God looks radically different than work done for yourself. It's not louder or flashier. It's steadier, kinder, and more faithful. It's the quiet accumulation of choices that reflect a kingdom not built on self-promotion, but on service. On integrity even when it costs. On diligence even when it's unseen. On humility even when you have power. The world is watching. Not to judge you, but to see if what you believe on Sunday shapes how you behave on Monday. And when it does, something shifts, not just in your career, but in the kingdom. If you like our content, consider subscribing. Or some topics didn't made in the list or topics that you want us to feature, please leave in the comments.